high and it's decreased. And I was saying in the previous session that there's a huge demand for female computer scientists, because if it's all about communication and creativity and so on, it's actually the girls usually have a slight edge on the guys at some of this sort of stuff. The reason we've got lots of guys is that in general, guys like programming just as an end in itself. It's just fun. But when you hire someone to build a big project, you don't want them just to go and do something because it's fun in themselves. You want them to do something that's going to be useful to everyone else. So we've kind of got this backwards thing happening where people who like the computer end up doing computer science, but you actually need people who like people, and who like talking to people, and especially who like listening to people and thinking about how to solve their problems. So the Department of Labour here has said 5 years of this decade, the number of people enrolled, and yet the shortage of applications for jobs went from 9% to 53%. They just couldn't get enough people. So, key things you need to be good at. You do need to be good at logical thinking, and I won't pretend that it's easy, okay? There's a lot of work to get a computer science degree, but the graduates really are glad that they did it. You need to be very good at communication, really good at working in a team. And that's one thing while you're at school especially you can develop, because one of the first interview questions you're guaranteed to get is, when is a situation you've been in where you've been in a team and something went wrong? Okay? And if your answer is either, I've never been in a team, then it's like, oh, okay. And if your answer is, oh, I've been in lots of teams and we never had problems, then they'll go, you haven't been in a real team then. Okay, so think of it, and it could be an orchestra, it could be a debating team, could be a rugby team, anything like that. And you say, okay, oh yeah, there's something went wrong. Our debating team was going off to this competition, and then one of the mums suddenly said that her son wasn't going to go, and we needed him in the team, and so we had to go and negotiate, and we found out it was this that was the problem, and so we negotiated to fix that, and we got them there, or something like that. It's those sort of stories that you can develop in any kind of team at the moment. It's actually those experiences of knowing how to work with people and to solve problems with groups of people, instead of just saying, well, just do it my way and everything will be okay. And so those sort of skills are really valued in software engineering. And then critical independent thinking, saying, is there a better way of doing this? Are we actually attacking this the right way? Have we actually got the right problem? Is this really what the customer wants? Most customers don't actually ask for what they want, they ask for what they think they want. And it's not that you don't want to get back to them and say, oh, you don't really know what you want, I'll do it. But it's like, well, why are you asking for that? Maybe, do you actually mean you're trying to solve this problem here? There's a famous example of an outfit as a library where they used to fill out every form in triplicate when they used paper cards so that it could be filed in 3 places. So they asked for a computer screen with 3 sections on it where you could type the information in 3 times. Okay. You need to think, what do you actually want to achieve here and how could I do it better for you? In case money matters, this is off Trade Me yesterday. The median salary for people working in IT is $95,000. That's after you get a bit of experience typically. It gets as low as $47,000. And it goes all the way down to hospitality and tourism with a median salary of $36,000. Now that's a sample of Trade Me, but IT is always up there because there's just a desperate shortage of people who know how to do things. Okay. Property is quite good, but I think there were like 50 jobs in property and 1,000 jobs in IT going at the moment on Trade Me. Yeah.
You said there's this huge shortage now, but by the time that we're out,
yeah.
Will there still be a shortage?
That's a really good question, actually. I just don't know if there will be a big shortage, and to some extent, so I don't think there will be because there's never a shortage of creative people. I mean, people keep thinking of stuff that you'd never have thought of. I mean, that flu trends or, who thought of YouTube, who thought of that, and so on. And so some of you will probably think of things that just never existed. I think what will happen is the progress can happen faster if there's not a shortage. But quite frankly, I suspect there always will be a bit of a shortage because it is hard work and it does take a particular kind of person with that big mixture of technical and people skills and so on to really do well. And that's not everyone's cup of tea. Yeah, so. Yeah. And by the way, I mean, it might sound like I'm trying to sell computer science and software engineering as a job. I'm actually perfectly happy if by talking to you today you think, oh gosh, I'm not so interested in this now, okay? Because there's no point spending years studying up on this sort of stuff and find out, well, you like using computers, but you actually weren't interested in developing computer stuff and that sort of thing. But I suspect you probably, if you're here, you're probably interested in that. I'll finish with a story of one other student. So Yanina comes from Nelson, like me, but a few years later. And so she came to Canterbury University, and she was studying journalism. She actually, in her own words, she hated computing with a passion. When she was at school, computing was like the really boring people that you didn't want to be with. This is Nelson. And it's probably really different here. And so she absolutely wasn't interested. But when she was at university in her first year, her boyfriend was doing computer science. And she was looking at what he was doing, and she said, actually, that's kind of interesting. And she actually started reading some of his books and got her head around it. And in her second year, she enrolled in computer science. And I first came across her at the end of that year because she'd done first year computer science, but she tried to do second year at the same time. She got the prize for first year, and she almost got the prize for second year at the same time. Both Craig and Yanina are not average students, but it's just an extreme example of, I mean, if she didn't have a boyfriend doing computing, she would be a journalist now, okay? And so one of my big goals is to let you know what the stuff is, so you don't have to find a boyfriend or girlfriend or accident, you know. We have quite a few students who just get into computer science by accident. They had to do it to fit in their timetable or something like that, and they discover that they absolutely love it. And the real big goal is that if you can find that you've got a passion for this stuff, find it out now so that you don't, you know, have to mess around doing journalism, for example. But that worked out really well in the end, because the book that we're writing for high schools, she wrote one of the chapters for us, and it's quite well written because she is trained as a journalist. So yeah, she's a high achiever. She's ended up joining, there's all sorts of programming competitions and so on that you can go in, and so her team did really well. And so here's a quote from her: "Really enjoyed the challenge of studying it, and there's so much to learn that you don't know." And the reason I love teaching it is that whenever I'm teaching it, I'm learning something, and there's just so many cool things that you think, well, that's not possible, and it is, or you think, well, that would be easy, and it isn't. And it's kind of neat dealing with those sort of things. So one of the things one of her teams went in the Microsoft Imagine Cup, where you have to, and the challenge was to imagine a greener world. And they came up with the idea of taxi buses. And the way that, so it's a cross between a taxi and a bus. Basically, these are minivans running around a city, and you just call them up like a taxi, but using some software, it plans the optimum way for a taxi to go around and pick people up and drop them off and so on. And again, the human side of it, they found out you need a response within, I can't remember the time, but it was within about 5 minutes. If it turns up within 5 minutes, it'll feel like a taxi. And by the way, another thing they found out, it's better if it arrives early, even if it's going to take you longer to get to your destination, because people like to get started. So if it arrived in 2 minutes, but it's going to take 5 minutes later at your destination overall, people are happy with that. And so they developed software that planned, and they simulated all these buses and taxis and random people calling in and so on, and they figured out the optimum way of doing it using some really clever algorithms. And it won them a prize which got them to Paris, to the finals for this competition, and that's the team that did it. And one of the things that they were really interested in was making a difference in the world. They actually calculated how many tons of carbon that this would save, not having empty buses going around and not having people driving cars. So it's all the convenience of a car and closer to the cost of a bus. Two of them have since formed a company, and they're still working on it. Unfortunately, they started just before the earthquake in Christchurch, and so there was actually a company was about to try it out, and then there were no buses in Christchurch. But as far as I know, that's still being developed, and it may well come to fruition. It's just a matter of really good algorithms and really good understanding of how people want things to work. So there's a few thoughts about what it takes to do computer science. If you want a bit more information, actually that second URL there, the CSANZ, Computer Science Association of New Zealand, it's all of the New Zealand University computer science departments have got together, and there's a brochure there. There's a high school page there with a brochure that sort of talks about what you might do at school and what sort of opportunities there are and so on for students in New Zealand.